We've got about 42 people, so we can go ahead and start. We got 4 sets of comments yesterday. 2 were specifically geared at the greenhouse gas goal that we had been talking about the last 2 meetings. Staff addressed that as well, and they also kind of gave their overall comments for goal structure, and BPA did the same. And then utilities indicated at about 3:50 yesterday afternoon that that they were still working on a proposal with some other folks. Given where we are, my thought would be to at least discuss the proposals that were made for greenhouse gases today by the parties that submitted them, and then we can see where we are from there. Maybe that'll help the utilities craft their goal, or further craft their goal. Does that sound like an acceptable plan?
Sounds good to OPC.
It sounds good to MEEA as well. Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Is anybody from the utilities, can you guys speak to maybe where your proposal is, maybe the number of parties or who you're working with, or is that all super secret?
I guess I will. This is Megan Partridge from PEPCO. Pearl is out today, unfortunately, so you guys will miss her smiling face. But yeah, we've had some conversations with folks from OPC and MEA and the advocates and some other groups. So I think we just are working through trying to hash out just some of the finer details, but we are hoping to have something, over the next couple of days that we can circulate back. And we're hoping that once that gets around, we'll have, kind of come to consensus with as many folks as possible and lining, or at least finding as many points of consensus, if not total consensus.
Okay. And would you anticipate having that, sent around to everyone by, you said a couple of days. So are you talking like Friday? You talking Monday?
I think it would be more reasonable to say Monday or Tuesday, just if only because we have a couple people out of the office over the next 2 days, just normal holiday things, unfortunately.
Understood. I don't want to get in a situation where we schedule another meeting for next week, and then Wednesday afternoon, hear from the utilities that, we need more time. That's all.
Totally understood. And we will do our best to not have that happen.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say, I can't say unequivocally because I can only control,
No, I get it. Yeah, I know you're one person speaking for many who are quiet and or absent today. But we really do need to start moving forward. I mean, if the goal structure is any indication as to what the rest of the schedule is looking like, I anticipate more meetings for other subjects as well. So I'm starting to get a little concerned about the timing. But all right, thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. And with that, again, just as a reminder, if you could state where you're calling or who you're representing, I'd appreciate it. You want to have a MEA? Is there someone from MEA who want to talk about their filing?
Good morning, Kitsu McNeil, Maryland Energy Administration.
Good morning.
I guess just to quickly recap what we sent out, our filing, I guess, yesterday was mostly geared towards the discussion that was held, I guess, the meeting from last week, speaking of the role of Empower in the overall GHG abatement goal of the state. And, based on our interpretation of what was said and the information that was provided by MDE, it seemed that they developed a model, or in their model, they modeled Empower to continue providing the level of performance that it has been providing over at least the last recent years. They looked at the the 2018 to 2020 cycle plans and use that to project going forward. And in terms of that, to us, it kind of sets a minimum expectation of what Empower should be delivering going forward. So with that in mind, we think that the new goal structure should, the overarching goal is going to be a GHG reduction goal. It at a minimum should be based on what Empower has done over the past, potentially converting that towards GHG emission reduction or abatement, and then using that as a basis for building other parts of the program. So, for example, we don't think necessarily that and we're still working through this at this point, but we don't necessarily think that we should limit the opportunities of Empower. So, for example, looking at the information provided, the plans included CVR, it included the transformer, distribution transformer. So those were built in, and if there's an opportunity to provide those savings and the benefits of those programs, as long as we can they're cost effective and we can evaluate those savings, I don't think it's a disadvantage to the state to have those programs in there. Overall, though, it seems that there's an opportunity to look at what has been done in Empower, convert that to a GHG goal. If we're going to compare the savings or look at the savings from Empower and compare it to other parts of what's going on in the state. For example, a few times on the call, EV deployment was mentioned, electrification efforts was mentioned. So, I guess a GHG abatement goal or target could allow for comparison across those areas. So, we're not opposed to having a GHG goal, but we think that the core of Empower so far is what was built into the GGRA plan, and it should continue going forward. So I think pretty much that was the main part of our comments yesterday. We also talked a little bit about emission intensity, and based on the presentation, we expect that to go down as we successfully implement our RPS and we achieve some of the goals set out by the GGRA plan. So the opportunity to incorporate programs that aren't necessarily tied to electricity use would be beneficial, and it's something, again, that once we can evaluate, once we can verify those savings, we can ensure that the state is benefiting from that. In addition, the GGRA plan talked about the expansion of Empower. The expansion specifically referenced switching from fuel sources fuel types such as heating oil and propane. I think that's something that, overall, as an expansion of Empower, that's something that we can incorporate to help us achieve our GHG reduction goals. So I guess in summary, we think that building on what has been done in Empower, looking at the past savings, similar to what was proposed by MEA at the beginning, looking at what has been done in the program, using that to set a baseline. We think there needs to be some distinction between the Empower funded programs and the non-Empower funded programs. But again, the key here for the non-Empower funded programs is to ensure that we can verify the savings. And especially, as we said in 2 filings ago, especially if we are going to have those in rate base anyway, we should seek ways to take advantage of that so we can help reduce and manage some of the costs for ratepayers, since we're going to have to, if we're going to set a goal independent of those savings, then that's just going to potentially add costs. So expanding the role of Empower to include fuel switching to electric heating systems from oil and propane is also something that should be considered. And finally, ensuring that we maintain the benefits to ratepayers. Now, one of the ways that MEA proposed that was to look at the net savings produced by the program. I think some other stakeholders have talked about net benefits or net MPV. We're open to looking at either of those, but there's a appetite from our end to ensure that we're at least maintaining the benefits that the ratepayers are receiving. And finally, we also would like to account for electrification and the efforts. In some cases, electrification will increase the usage, but in terms of reducing the GHG emissions in the state, there may be some benefit to that. So that's something that should be considered as well. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments, concerns about MEA's proposal? They're all speechless. All right. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Howard, are you there, sir?
I am.
All right. You want to talk about your proposal, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Judge McLean, and appreciate the opportunity to visit with folks and share some of our perspective. So, I certainly won't go through, the entire document because, folks have had probably the opportunity to review it. I think from our vantage point, kind of responding to the proposal from Mr. Gravatt as well as the joint utilities, we thought that there was a few ways that we could, or we would presuppose, having a unified goal structure of greenhouse gas, but having some targets or some various different high priority areas that we would focus on trying to essentially have some exceptions or have some different ways to integrate other policy considerations or other business considerations as we're working on some of that process. So again, I think we have seen in other states, an overarching goal with sub policy considerations work, and we want to. I think our perspective is having a smaller goal structure or a smaller sub target goals structure or something of that kind is probably a more workable process. So in that vein, I think again we support the general move that folks have been making towards the GHG goal, but think there's a few ways that we would consider some changes or some ways to balance that out. So there's some various different issues as it relates to the business models that have been going on, and certainly we've heard from other participants that there is a desire to move to GHG, but there are some challenges to incorporate some of the things that might be going on in that process. So we had suggested that perhaps a way to do that was a percentage target for megawatts to be able to look at how to be embedded in that process to help support more cost-effective energy efficiency. And there's a number of different ways to do that. And then as again, we don't know what the target proposal is or the percentage number is, but certainly as that that could be reevaluated as changes go on to the process. The other element would just be again to kind of support broader market transformation efforts. Dr. McNeil already talked about some of the modeling that's been done from MDE, but from our vantage point, I think that means that we've got to do some things differently in terms of being able to kind of up the game of what Empower is supposed to be doing. And so from our vantage point, that probably means that we need to provide more opportunities for market transformation. I know that the group had been discussing kind of an innovation category, which has now been, I think, scrubbed as a proposal name, but kind of another alternative approach. Perhaps we could work on market transformation. Maybe that's a going opportunity, but that we're going to have to be able to work into things like broader electrification opportunities, other innovations in the marketplace that we may not even know at this place, but being able to work through that moving forward, and certainly giving the utilities some opportunity and some runway to innovate and to create new solutions to meet those goals. I think that's something that we think makes a fair bit of sense. As Dr. McNeil mentioned as well, with some of the caveats that we have some measurement verification and quality control on what's going on in that process. And then finally, just again, I think as a policy consideration, we have the group has talked in a fair bit of detail about programs to support low-income and disadvantaged communities. I am still working with some of my team to provide some of the quality characterizations of what we might want, and certainly can supplement that. Our information here when we get towards the equity and low-income category issues. But I just want to reinforce that there's a number of different ways to get to a savings goal or a spending goal or a benefits goal. We've provided that in our documents. We do, again, based on our research, spending goals are the majority of the ways that the states have handled some of those processes. But there are, again, benefits proposals as well as just overall savings targets that are in place and are working relatively well. So just as an example, but I think ultimately having something in that's codified as a goal will help move this framework forward. Obviously that does have some implications of what we're thinking about from a cost effectiveness perspective and how we incorporate some of those changes. I've provided some suggestions of how other states have done that in our filing, and are happy to talk about it. I think in addition, outside of the target, and I know this is something that Mr. Voorhees has talked about in relation to OPC filings, but I think being able to start tracking some demographic information as part of or in relation to this filing or this goal would be important. We've already shared some information about the energy burdens for various different communities of color, as well as just other regional variation that we're seeing in the state. So having some of that information to be able to help inform program participation and then future delivery of the programs, I think is certainly something that is meritorious, and making sure that not only are we reaching the GHG goals that we want to as a group, but that we're also making sure that we're impacting customers who could be the folks that would benefit most from those programs. So those would be kind of, again, the high level pieces that we are thinking about, and in response to the previous proposal that we've seen from MEA and the joint utilities. So I'll stop there, and if folks have questions, happy to take them.
All right. Thank you, sir. And before I forget, thank you for sending out the email with the couple links for for the next topic, the low to moderate income.
Julia gets the praise on that from OPower. I have asked some of my colleagues who specifically work on some of our low income work, and unfortunately because they were indisposed earlier in the week with some very deep level things about that. But yeah, we're working on it. So
I think that'll be helpful moving forward. So
yeah, I appreciate that, and we do have that on the books on my side to get some more detailed information. So apologies about the delay on that.
Oh no, you're ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned. All right, any questions, comments about Mr. Howard's filing and ACEEE's proposal? Feels like a Monday morning. No one wants to speak. All right. Yes, Dr. McNeil.
Kitson McNeil, Maryland Energy Administration. Mr. Howard, just a quick follow-up and some comments made in the last meeting regarding having a spending requirement and how that may lead to some behaviors that we don't necessarily want to promote. What's your experience, or what has ACEEE seen in other states regarding that? I know it's related to some of the stuff that was sent out by Julie as well. So if you could. For low income
goals, is that what you were asking,
yeah.
Dr. Miller?
Yes,
okay.
Regarding.
Yeah, I mean, there's, generally speaking, so there's 20 states in the District of Columbia that have some kind of a goal as it relates to low income. The majority of that is based on spending level issues, and I think our experience has been that that is easy to track as it relates to utility issues, and does support, it does help in attribution issues, especially where there are states that have multiple utilities. So that certainly, from a reporting structure, is the most prevalent approach that's been taken. There are, obviously that helps, again, from an administration and an attribution perspective. I think the other states that have kind of a tiered approach or a layered approach, or again, just an alternate savings approach, as I mentioned with Pennsylvania, I don't have the level of specificity of how their challenges or their trade-offs of what they're doing, but I understand that those savings are being met. In places like Connecticut, they have kind of a layered approach where they do a savings and a benefit, a savings and a spending benefit issue. And I think, I don't know folks who work in the Connecticut service territory as well or as others, but I think they are making it work, though it does have some challenges as it relates to the utility approach. I think this is an issue that we've seen as it relates to performance incentives as well, we tend to support savings-based incentive mechanisms as opposed to spending-based incentive mechanisms, because our inclination is you want to pay for what you get, or you want to verify what you get, as opposed to spending just to say you're spending. And not to say that you won't get goals from that process, but if our ultimate goal is to try to get to savings reductions, we should peg to savings reductions. And I think that would be kind of our overall thought process to see how that works. I hope that is responsive to your question.
Well, yes, thank you. And I guess in advance of her presentation, thanks to Ms. Friedman as well for providing that information. So.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Howard? All right. Okay. Mr. Hurley.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dan Hurley with the Commission staff. We submitted comments yesterday. I think the kind of the onus behind our comments is we're just trying to figure out how we can kind of keep this thing moving along. We kind of noted that there's kind of two ends to this spectrum of goals. Kind of noted the OPC seems more on the tighter and power window, and the utilities want to have a lot of flexibility. So I think we were trying to, come up with a middle ground. And I think part of the discussions yesterday, Chuck, we were involved with the call yesterday with the utilities. I think part of that is we're going to try to have some intermediate meetings amongst ourselves to see if we can start reaching some consensus amongst ourselves about this goal structure. As we're have been doing a lot of talking the last few weeks. We haven't moved the needle too much here. So I think ideally we're going to have some of these call it a subgroup for lack of a better term, to try and get a more, hopefully, consensus, concrete proposal in front of you, or at least be able to identify where we have strong consensus and at least where we have non-consensus.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with the sub work group meeting. You guys don't need my okay to go ahead and meet. If you guys can work this out without me, I'm all for it. So please meet away.
Yes, I just think we need to have more discussions amongst ourselves to really kind of come together as a group to see if we can come up with a consensus. So really quickly overview, we put down the primary goal should be based on the greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan for 2030. We have some subcategories in there, primary through the traditional energy efficiency, demand response. We did throw a number on the utilities, X amount percent. We said somewhere between 75 and 80%. Obviously, that's subject to discussion, but at least there's a number out there. I don't know if it's going to cause heartburn or not enough heartburn, or it's just to get a number out there to start a discussion, trying to make everyone somewhat happy and somewhat unhappy, I guess, is how you can reach consensus. We're thinking beneficial electrification where it's cost effective, but we're not sure, at least for this next program cycle, about limiting opportunities about efficient gas equipment yet. So the main goal should be the emissions goal. Maybe we should have some intermediate goals or targets on megawatt hours, demand, therms, and capacity, but possibly, if we do have any kind of potential performance mechanism, we're not necessarily need to tie every goal to the performance mechanism. That's also for future work group meetings beyond our goal structure. We still think the other programs have a place in Empower, and we're also, staff is discussing with the other parties about, how we're tying in the other commission initiatives, really mostly under PC 44, is how those could tie in with Empower, maybe not replace Empower or combine with Empower, but at least coordinate towards an overall reduction goal, as most of those other initiatives are also have the potential to reduce the emissions, as well as provide some other benefits. We're still on the side of the savings based on net and not gross at this time, but if there's some maneuvering to be done, we think there should definitely be some kind of minimum NPV for programs, or at least a portfolio to be moving forward. It's kind of hard to have a gross goal and then look to drop a program that might have a low NPV, because then the goal might not be able to be met without that program. So there's some discussion there that still needs to be had. We support the savings being reported continued as a first year and life cycle basis as is currently. But we're also looking for, if we're doing first year savings, we should have some kind of minimum weighted average life per measure to ensure that we have those long-term measures still intact. And finally, we are supportive of kind of a minimum spend target for limited income goals, along with developing appropriate tracking metrics as mentioned by OPC and BEIC. And that's the summary of our comments.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Anybody have, yes, Dylan.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thanks, Dan. Dylan Voorhees with VEIC, working with OPC. Two comments or potentially questions. Dan, first of all, I think that your exploration of how to ensure integration or integration without, hopefully I'm not putting words in your mouth, integration with the other cases like PC44 without too much overlap or duplicity. I think that's a really valuable goal, and I think it's challenging. And one of the reasons I've sort of been observing, and I think this gets back to a comment you made with your whiteboard sharing a meeting or two ago about an overall goal for utilities on greenhouse gases. It does seem like one of the reasons that there's a lot of push toward having all of these sort of savings count toward Empower goals is because Empower is the place where there are these broad goals, and there's a lot of parties, there's a lot of process, there's history. It is a goal-driven program, and that's really beneficial. And so it seems to me like some parties are kind of looking to Empower to be the place where there are goals for utility activities. And I think there's some benefit to that. I also think there's some limitations to that, and it feels to me like Marin would probably be better off if Empower wasn't the only place where there were goals that help guide those activities across across some of those areas. So that's kind of a comment or observation. I don't know if you want to say more. I don't know what the solution is, but and it may be beyond the scope of this work group a little bit, but I do appreciate that the need for some, or the benefit of some overarching goals could be that you could more easily understand how achievement of Empower goals contributes to some larger policy or regulatory goals.
Thank you, sir.
That's it. Yep.
Go ahead, whoever wanted to jump in there. Anyone else for staff?
Well, I just have a quick.
Oh, yes, sir.
Maryland Energy Administration, just a quick follow-up. So in order to ensure that the different programs and the different initiatives by the state, especially the ones led by the PSC, are moving utilities, or I guess, the regulated entities towards that goal, would it just be beneficial to have, and again, this is just throwing it out there, conversion of the efforts that are kind of what we suggested, just the efforts that are being made by the utilities are converted towards, consistently to a GHG reduction number that can be reported, verified, and used to attribute towards the state goal. So, and for example, we're specifically right now addressing things related to Empower, but looking at the diagram that was just referenced by Mr. Voorhees that Mr. Hurley put up last week, it kind of goes potentially beyond the scope of Empower. So is it a situation where we just need to have consistent verification of the efforts and converting that, or having a consistent conversion or measurement of that, so that we can report it with confidence that this is what is being done for across these efforts, as opposed to making a goal just for Empower. Kind of aligning whatever the efforts are at the PSC with that GHG abatement goal, and go from there. So just a thought.
Thank you, sir. Dan, you got any thoughts or response to that?
Dan Hurley, Commission staff. Yeah, that's really is the tricky part of this. I know in past orders and even in past hearings, at least with Empower, the Commission's always been kind of interested in how we're going to interact and how Empower's interacting with the other initiatives. Now, these other initiatives have their own cases. They have their own time structures. I mean, they're mostly our pilots. We're talking about the energy storage pilot. We're talking about the EV pilot. We're talking about the community solar pilot. Those are some of the major piloted initiatives that they already have their own kind of timeline set. So, they're not going to necessarily track with our timeline on when we have to file this report next year. So yeah, I think as far as consistency across evaluation and cost effectiveness, I know we've at least with energy storage, we try to use similar avoided cost metrics for analyzing savings. And we're trying to use the Empower methodologies there. I know that the EV work group has engaged with Joe Loper, who's the Commission evaluator, on how we do our cost effectiveness and how it might impact how they're doing their cost effectiveness. And I know there's a general interest in the Commission to try to see that consistency across these other programs, and as far as how they are determined, how we're measuring cost effectiveness, how we're evaluating those programs for their savings and their whether they're meeting their own internal type goals or legislative type mandates and goals as well. So there's a definite interest in trying to find that consistency across these programs. It just, I think that's it's just something that we need to discuss. I'll have to take that back with my colleagues and figure out how we're going to try to implement that consistency across these various programs. But I think they are potentially driving towards reaching some greenhouse gas goal, whether it's just Empower focused only or whether we're going to try to make a larger goal and give Empower a piece of that bigger goal and have these other programs have a piece of the goal as well.
Dylan, I'll get to you in just a second. Dan, just to follow up on that, when you said a larger greenhouse goal, are you talking like the states or the Commission would establish one and then Empower would have a percentage of that?
Right. So I think we're looking at the greenhouse gas goal, the reduction goal for 2030, and I think we can come up with a way to determine what Empower's impact on that could be. But we could maybe figure out. And honestly, the thing here is obviously that not all utilities are doing all these other programs as well. So Empower is limited to 4 utilities, and the cooperative, the electric vehicle pilot is limited to the IOUs. That's the same with the battery storage pilot. So there's areas that aren't, so these aren't necessarily consistent programs across the state. So if we can determine, if there's a way to determine a larger movement towards that greenhouse emissions reduction in 2030, and then be able to maybe parse out what Empower can bring to that goal, what the other programs can bring to that goal now, and also that would be determined on utilities actually participating in those other pilots.
Okay, thank you, sir. Dylan.
Thank you. I'm going to just stay off camera because my connection's a little bit weak, but I think those are excellent comments and observations from Mr. Hurley and Dr. McNeil about the value of having a single metric, and importantly, the importance of a similar method of calculating those impacts. Those are both really useful tools. The last comment that Dan, you made about the different utilities are participating differently in some of those activities, that's true at for a wide variety of activities, especially on the utility side of the meter, even including within Empower, right? So we have utilities that are doing CVR and utilities that are not doing CVR, and so that's that inconsistency, which is not inherently a bad thing, I think is one of the reasons why establishing goals is challenging when you have utilities participating in sort of wide variety of activities. I think there's a lot more consistency behind the meter, but at least having that metric, even if there isn't a larger goal associated with it, as Dr. McNeil said, I think that's valuable. One clarification question, Dan, I think it's for you, but maybe it's for others too. You said continued reporting of annual and life cycle savings. I think you meant energy savings. In terms of a greenhouse gas goal, it was my understanding of kind of what was on the table is that would be a lifetime greenhouse gas savings metric, because we have quite a bit of there's such significant change in the emission intensity anticipated going forward that you could really kind of skew results if you're not looking forward. I think that was what MDE had said. So is that your understanding, or for anyone else, we're talking about greenhouse gas goal, we're talking about a lifetime greenhouse gas measure?
Yeah, I think with the greenhouse gas, it probably should be on the lifetime measure, since, the measure installed today can be, will be reducing emissions over the life of the measure, not just in its first year. And then, you get more installations in the second year, and that's going to provide savings over the life of that measure as well. So we're avoiding it now for however long carbon can remain in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and at the same time, the avoided emissions, particularly from electricity, are going to go down over time, and so it'd be useful to be capturing both of those dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Anyone else agree or disagree with the greenhouse lifetime measurement? Or is that something we can actually agree on this topic? Yes, sir.
There it is. Judge, I think you know the answer for me, but we support a lifetime greenhouse gas reduction.
That's good.
Abatement goal. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is Brian from ACEEE. I think, our research suggests that that's an appropriate goal.
We'll take it. All right. Julia.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I don't think we oppose any kind of goal. I would stress that the some of the reports that have been mentioned from like ACEEE about valuing the lifetime savings and things like that do stress the importance of having balance in the portfolio and finding a way to value shorter term measures as well. And so maybe that's not in the goal structure, maybe that's somewhere else, but allowing for having some sort of structure that supports goals or supports measures that will deliver, GHG abatement now at scale when we need it the most to avoid long-term climate damages, as well as help align, the benefits of energy efficiency to those who are paying for it now. And so I think there are certainly ways beyond the goal structure to find a way to balance the portfolios, but would just caution against anything that would skew things too far in one direction.
Thank you, ma'am.
So this is Megan Partridge from the utilities. Yep. So speaking only, I haven't actually confirmed with the other utilities. So speaking only on behalf of the Exelon utilities, but I think we're in a position where we don't necessarily disagree with, or we don't oppose rather, the lifetime GHG goals. As long as, we're talking about the GHG goal and not, any megawatt hour kind of subcomponent of that. And I also would like to just, thank staff for what they put forward. I think it might not have gone to the whole distribution list though. But I did want to thank them for kind of helping move the needle forward and pushing on what Pearl and some others had done over the last week and trying to rally the various parties towards moving towards consensus. So thanks, Dan, and your team, as well as Pearl, who's not here. So.
All right. Dan, if you like, I can re-forward that if everybody didn't get it.
I thought I had it to the whole list, but that'd be great if you do that for us.
Okay. I will add that in there. Anybody else have any comments on staff's proposal or comments or anything else we've discussed thus far? All right. Julia, I know BPA had submitted comments. I kind of interpreted those as more like an overall kind of where you stood in relation to what we've discussed this far. Is there anything you'd like to hit on?
Sorry, so I'm with Oracle, and I think BPA.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rogers. Were you the one?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in and say
my apologies.
No worries. Flattered to be mistaken for Julia. I think you summed it up pretty well. We wanted to touch on, and thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity, but we essentially wanted to touch on some of the key kind of issues that were still being kind of wrestled from the past meetings. Since, I think folks probably have had a chance to look at it, I won't go through all of it, but I did just kind of want to reiterate support and alignment with a lot of the comments that have already been made this morning. In particular on the notion of having coordination and alignment across different programs in the state. That's a key principle of the National Standard Practice Manual, which is something BPA has been chiming on for a long time, but wanted to continue to emphasize that as a resource that this group can look to, especially as we turn to the cost effectiveness portion later on. And in particular, looking at how for balancing portfolios that Julia had mentioned as well, I wanted to highlight that we do strongly support a lifetime savings goal. And the reason being very much in line with what Julia said about having balance in the portfolios, and research from ACEEE has actually shown that there can be a bias if you focus on just the annual savings goal. So that's one thing to highlight. And we are supportive of an overarching greenhouse gas savings goal, and would just want to reiterate, the importance of, as we're figuring out how, what is included in the scope and then how to determine goals from that point, emphasizing how efficiency behind the meter is really critical to continue to, support benefits for ratepayers, which is something, the commission staff and OPC have also, and ACEEE have all mentioned. We are strongly supportive of that approach and want to emphasize too, as we're looking for coordination with other DERs like EVs, like solar, that having efficiency and a strong, goal oriented towards, behind the meter efficiency measures will be a really strong and important foundation to the success of, electrification, adding EVs, and all those other distributed energy resources. So those are kind of the key pieces that we wanted to highlight again, just adding back to the conversation. And again, I included the NSPM, the National Standard Practice Manual, as a resource. As we're deciding between net versus gross, there's some guidance that can help determine then what you would want to look into if you do use net savings. And just one final thing to highlight is that as we're looking, this might be something more in a low income conversation. But as we go into those discussions of who is included, there are a number of resources, and actually this is something I didn't include in our comments, but I'm happy to forward afterwards, looking at the different funding sources available, both federal and state programs that target healthy homes in various different ways. In particular, there are a number of lead abatement programs and funding sources in Maryland. And so looking at how we can have better coordination, again, between empower and efficiency programs and other programs that are going into the home and addressing, the building shell and other issues, which could offer opportunities for coordination and alignment and, maximizing the benefits with limited dollars. So that is kind of the sum of it, and I welcome any questions folks have. And again, I can follow up with that resource with some of the other Healthy Homes funding.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. Anyone have any comments or questions for BPA? All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. All right. Those are all the comments. We got 4 sets of comments today. Is there anything, any revelations that came from today's meeting? Yes, Julia.
Thanks so much. Just one question, I guess, for those who have presented. Are we still talking about, if we are talking about a lifetime GHG goal, are we still talking about that on an annual basis? I would just appreciate clarification.
You're muted, Mr. Gravatt.
Sorry, double muted. I would say yes. It would be lifetime savings that are achieved in each year of program implementation.
Okay, great, thank you. And if others have thoughts, would welcome.
This is Dylan Voorhees for VEIC. I would only amend that to say that I think it's important to have flexibility within a planning cycle. So we'll keep calling it a 3-year cycle. And so if the goals are, I don't know if this is to your question, but if the goals are very rigid annual goals that you must achieve this in 2024, you must achieve this in 2025, that goes a little bit against the 3-year cycle. So I think that's the only caveat that I would say. Not necessarily that they would be only 3-year cumulative goals, but that it's important to recognize the value of flexibility to meet goals over the planning cycle.
Well, would the annual goals in your mind be more or less measuring sticks rather than actual hard and fast goals if we're measuring on a lifetime basis?
Well, I would encourage the utilities or commission staff to comment on this too. I'm not sure the exact best way to characterize it, Your Honor. I think it is important to be checking in. In fact, the utilities file currently 6-month, reports that give the commission a sense of where they're going. So I think that continuing that reporting cycle to have eyes on how things are going would presumably continue. I actually think the semi-annual cadence for that works well. And I guess there's not necessarily a different kind of regulatory review that's happening at the 12-month period as opposed to what's happening at the 6-month period. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Gravatt.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was going to say, I think that Dylan and I agree. So, and I don't know if this clarifies the answer to your question or not, but so a goal for life cycle savings, total goal for life cycle savings that occur over the 3 years of a program cycle, say, or 4 years if we go there, rather than the savings that have to occur in each year. So that if there's a 3-year goal of, say, 1,000, that would mean the average in each year would be 333 and a third. Utilities could get 250 in one year and 500 in the next year, so that the total is 1,000 at the end of the 3 years. But that's different than any kind of cumulative effect. It's really looking at the life cycle savings that are achieved in each year of program implementation. The total of the 3 years would be the goal rather than the. Is it making any more? Am I making it more clear or less clear?
For me, you're making it clear. It's just, I think Dylan had referenced something about an annual goal, and so that's when we were talking about life cycle and annual. So that's I think I understand you. So
well, that's good.
I do too, and I agree with Jim, and I think it is an annual goal, and the question is there an expectation that the utilities achieve that precise amount in every single year, and it's very prescribed, or there's consequences or raised eyebrows. And I'm trying to say that we want flexibility for the utilities to achieve a little more in this year, a little less in this year, and to be able to plan and adapt within the planning cycle.
Okay.
Exactly. Totally agree with that.
Okay.
I think the utilities would also appreciate that, kind of consistent with the current Empower cycles, where it's the average over the 3 years, rather than a discrete amount in each individual year.
Okay.
Or 4 years, or whatever the planning period is.
Okay, great. All right. So maybe we should throw out the term annual goal. All right. All right. So we've got Kitson or Dr. McNeil, and then Joe Loper.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kitson McNeil, Maryland Energy Administration. So I guess in our initial proposal, we said that the utility should pursue annually, which I guess that could be interpreted in different ways, but at a minimum, the plans should at least try to target. And I think that this is consistent with what Mr. Gervat put forward, that at least they should try to balance it out across the years. So, we agree with the approach that if it's a 3-year cycle, then the goal should be over 3 years, but ideally, we would like them to at least try to balance it out and pursue some balanced amount over each year if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Joe.
Yes, I was just going to suggest one slight clarification for Jim, the way that Jim said this. It's life cycle savings resulting from program activity occurring in the 3-year period. And so the way if I just for the record, the way that you said it, Jim, if I read it literally, was that it would be savings occurring in the 3-year period, and I don't think anybody's intending that.
I agree with you, Joe. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification, sir. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any comments? All right, so if nobody else has anything to talk about, unless Dan wants to talk about the Sixers collapse last night.
No, thank you. I barely made this call because of that.
So cool.
I guess so. We're left with waiting until next week and another meeting. So unless anybody objects, I would say now, Megan, you threw out Tuesday. Is that can I say Tuesday at noon for comments?
Your Honor, this is Philip Sheehan from OPC. I think, well, I appreciate Megan's optimism. I think Tuesday it would be better like our normal Wednesday noon.
Normal Wednesday noon deadline, with comments coming at 2 o'clock?
Correct.
All right. All right, so let's do that. And seriously, I really want to move on from this, not only this goal, but the whole goal structure. Again, I know we don't agree on things, but we really have to get moving. So we'll meet again 10 o'clock next Thursday. And if you could have your comments at 12 o'clock, that would be on the Wednesday before, that would be ideal for everybody. So we can have a chance to review them. Dr. McNeil.
Thank you, Your Honor. Quick question. In terms of everyone else providing comments, what are we providing comments on the meeting today, or the overall goal structure comments are due next week? I just want to make sure I'm aware of what exactly we're due next week.
Well, I know a couple parties did kind of like an overall goal structure comment, but I was just anticipating that the utilities were going to file some greenhouse gas goal structure. Is that correct?
So the utilities had proffered up to, I think, kind of a subset, kind of our proposed structure, and we were waiting on some of those parties to provide some responses on what that goal structure is. So,
but we're just talking about greenhouse gas, or are we talking about everything?
With the goal structure and the pieces feeding into the greenhouse gas goal, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the whole thing.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, this is Philip Sheen from OPC. Megan, are you referring to what Pearl sent last night at 10 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to need more time to respond to that.
All right, like when you say more time, what are you saying, Mr. Sheehan? Because I really don't want to go a week without, as much as I enjoy seeing everyone, I don't want to skip a meeting.
I think the idea is that we're going to respond and converse as many times as necessary, and then hopefully on Wednesday we'll have something for you.
Okay. All right. That's it. Mr. Gravatt, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, I was just going to say I pretty much what Philip said, but I also want to move that we call this thing that's going to be filed on Wednesday Pearl's proposal, so that we can stop talking about Mr. Gravatt's proposal.
Pearl's jam.
There we go.
There we go. That would be fine.
But I do also.
I'm going to say go for it just to make her super awkward.
Right. But I'm going to express my appreciation to PHI for reaching out, and I do have some optimism that this is going to be productive use of time, Your Honor. So I hope that I'm not wrong.
Good. Yeah, I'm all about productive time. So, and I appreciate that, Megan. And Dr. McNeil, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
That works. Thank you.
Does it? Okay, good. As long as I'm not sure I'm clear on it, but so anybody who wants to submit comments Wednesday at noon. Okay, please try and get those out so everyone can review them, including me. All right. All right. Well, this was a short meeting, and at least Pearl was correct about that one. So, all right. All right. I guess we'll see everyone next week, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.